One of the things that leaders tell me about business at the moment is that it can be really, really tough. We are dealing with a rapid change of pace in many businesses, both sort of public sector, private sector, small, large business. There's the political climate, the economic climate. There's, I guess, the challenge of particularly the younger generation not necessarily being committed for very long in an organization. And then, of course, the day-to-day challenge that comes with running a business when you're trying to engage your team and really get them on board to your vision and what you want to achieve so that the business can be successful. And one of the things, Gabrielle, when we met you that was just so profound for me was the absolute power that finding a different way to communicate and engage has, particularly through what you shared with us around storytelling. So we really wanted to have you on because it's just made an impact, a big impact for us, but also sharing that with our clients, it's made some big impacts there. So without further ado, I'm going to open up to you to let us know, like, what is storytelling and why, as leaders and business owners, would we even want to think about making this as part of our toolkit that helps us to get our message out and really engage people?
Yeah, excellent. And thanks for having me, because there is nothing I like better than talking about the power of storytelling. So it was it. And if I can sort of go back a bit, it was like, I sort of first discovered storytelling as a powerful skill probably about 20 years ago, when I worked as a senior leader in National Australia Bank, and I was leading big change projects. And what I found is that when I shared a story, and a personal story, it seemed to get the message across, and people seemed to understand it, and it seemed to sort of draw people into what I was saying. So, I left NAB sort of not long after that, and thought storytelling is an absolute skill, and I think it's a skill everyone can learn and get better at it. Storytelling has evolved. So, 20 years ago, no one was talking about it. It does seem to be the buzzword at the moment, which, is good. It's good for business, for me. But I think, and it's not a fad. I don't think it's, but people go, is it a fad? I go, humans have been telling stories since, day one. You need to look no further than our Indigenous community of the power of stories, where, Dreamtime stories, the lessons of those stories have been passed down for tens of thousands of years through the story. So storytelling is not a fad. Business has just woken up to how powerful it is. And so one of the work I love and talking about it is, a lot of the time people don't even think of sharing a story. My focus is always on personal stories, because I think they are the most powerful stories anyone can share, but they're the most underutilized. And I think people don't do it for a few reasons. It's almost like they think it's not professional. Like, why would I tell a personal story about what I do? So they don't think it's professional. So part of my training is actually showing them it's not only not professional, but it's one of the most effective ways you can influence and communicate. So why would you not do it? And then giving them the skills and the capability then leads to them the confidence to actually do it. So it's almost like I hope I give people permission to use it, where some people go, it never even occurred to me to share a personal story. But through the training, they've now got the capability, and then for the confidence. And like it is a skill, as you said, Ness, at the start. It's an absolute skill. And just like any other skill, some of us will be naturally better at than others, but all of us can get better with the right training and support to do so.
And I think also the framework around that, so that can give the confidence, because I think also personal stories, there's so many different reasons, I imagine, that people don't want to share personal stories. Things that are coming up in my mind are around, if I think old school corporate, it's not professional, like you said. And interesting, this whole awakening around storytelling in business. It's kind of like the whole mindfulness in business. I remember in corporate couple of decades ago, I was like, oh, what's meditation? No, that's not for us. Or self-care, which is so important in terms of what we talk about around moving away from the hustle culture. And so this is another aspect to more human, I suppose, human leadership, human business, being more present, and therefore being able to engage people. And I'd love to go a little bit deeper on the personal side of things, the personal story. So we talked about, or actually you tell me, what are the reasons that you think people hold back? Why don't they want to share personal stories?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I think one of the things I just said about they don't even think they're like it's professional, so they don't do it. And even if they do see some people do it, they go, well, I just don't know how to do it. That is that is one reason. There is certainly a generational gap. And so when I first started seeing this, you know, the vast majority of the people I would speak to or would be in my training rooms would be going, storytelling, give me a break. What the hell has that got to do with anything? I very rarely see that now. It was like, I think that it's a generational thing, and you've got younger leaders, but you've also, like Ness, as you introduced it, we've got a whole new generation that they want to be connected to the organization. They want to be connected to the leader. They're more values driven than we ever were. They want to connect to purpose. And the only way you can do that is through story, because story creates the connection. Yes, you clearly need all the data and the information. I'm not saying that's not important, but people don't connect with that. So it's through, to me, storytelling is and the reason the personal story is. I come from storytelling from a purely practical perspective. I used to be a leader. I run my own business. So I understand the frustrations and challenges of all that, like leadership and sales and all that. I know that when you share a story, it helps you communicate your message better and it gets it across. I also know that when you share a personal story, to do that, because all the research shows this, both what I've experienced in the last 20 years, what my clients have told me, but also what the research says from neuroscientists, people a hell of a lot smarter than me, that when you hear a story as a human being, you not only connect to the story, but you connect to the storyteller. So it can actually strengthen connections between the person sharing the story and who they're sharing the story with. And if you think of that as in a leadership, like the people you lead, every time you share a personal story, you're strengthening that connection, whether you're with clients or potential clients. And it can not only strengthen a relationship and a connection, it can fast track it. So you're meeting a client for the first time, you know, the stories you can share can be really powerful. And the other thing too, when I say personal stories, I'm not talking about, you know, your deepest, darkest fears and secrets and like going deep into therapy. And sometimes it's just a case of something that didn't happen at work and you're using that. A lot of people, business owners, for example, I can almost guarantee you, if you're listening to this and you're the owner of a business, you started that business for a reason. And I reckon I could spend 5 minutes with you and find the story or the stories why you started the business, why you're passionate about what you do. And I think sometimes, and this is still answering your question, business owners and maybe small to medium business owners feel the need that they want the company to feel bigger than what they are. And they may have started sharing their personal story, but they stopped doing it. They sort of go, it's no longer about me. We're bigger and we want to grow. Yes, it's still about you though. And that story that shows your passion about why you started, shows why you are doing what you do. That is such a powerful story, and it should be shared both internally and externally at any opportunity you get.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I want to pick up on what you said in relation to, you know, sharing about you, and just this whole thing. I remember going back a few years when business owners were sort of told to be more vulnerable, and what that kind of got interpreted as in some ways was, I've got to cry on camera. And share my dirty laundry and tell you all the things. And so that you're sitting there watching or listening to this feeling so uncomfortable because they're processing a story like that's really, you know, huge in their world. And they're rambling and you're sitting there going, what's the point? I don't understand how this ties together. And I wonder whether that's, some people get that confused with that whole, I've got to be vulnerable, so therefore I've got to choose really personal stories as opposed to stories that happen in my life.
Yeah, you're so true.
Talk a little bit to that.
Yes, absolutely. So I see this, I've seen it evolve over like the last few years, where storytelling's sort of been seen as, we should share more stories. And then we top that with, we've got to be vulnerable. And
Mm,
you're exactly right. Some people think that translates to I've got to cry or I've got to get
mm,
other people crying. And
mm.
and what I also see, and this really, it's starting to really do my head in. In fact, I wrote a LinkedIn post about it today.
Right.
So in some companies, we go, right, we want everyone to be sharing stories and we need to be more human and more vulnerable, but don't actually give them the framework to do it. And
Right.
don't give them the training to do it and the what not to do and what to do. And it absolutely sets them up for failure. So people share these stories. They think they're doing the right thing because it's vulnerable and they're crying or they're getting people crying. And everyone's going, oh, this is awkward. And
Yeah.
it actually does not achieve anything. And that is not good storytelling. That is really bad storytelling. And it actually sort of feels a little bit like manipulation when your
Mm.
whole aim is, oh, I'm going to cry, and or if I cry and be vulnerable, people feel connected with me. If that's your reason from sharing stories, you're starting from a wrong place. I remember I read an article a couple of years ago, and it was someone, I don't even know who it was because I seriously do not rate them. They talked about the 4 types of stories business leaders should share, and one of the stories was a tearjerker. And I just
Oh.
went, you've got to be kidding. If that's where you're starting, this is the outcome I want, is a tearjerker. That
Mm.
is pure manipulation. And to me, storytelling in business done right is one of the most authentic and respectful ways to communicate and create a connection.
Even in what you're saying there, I feel like it almost gives people permission to not have to make people cry. It's like
Yeah.
the pressure is off people. This is not the purpose. And of course, then what comes with that, it's about considering what's the intention behind sharing my story. And also when we first met you, that's what really stood out to me around what's the key message that I need to get across? What's the intention behind this story so that I can find a story, make it relevant, and have that continued impact. And the other thing I think is, you mentioned that storytelling, it creates a connection with the story as well as the person that's telling it. And this piece around business owners going to business, we find so often it's almost like they forget the reason or the reasons they went in. Business can become so hard, or we're stuck in the day-to-day busy trap whirlwind that we forget those reasons. And so I wonder, by having this process of reconnecting to story, we get to reconnect to
Yeah.
it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because every time you retell that story, you don't just retell a story, you relive it and you get
Yes.
energized by it. But yeah, it's and like a founder, a stories, they should be part of your recruitment process. They should be part of
Yes.
your induction process. They should
Yeah.
be spoken about externally on social media. It's like and if you come across good stories that can have a real impact, why would you not share them? Like
Mm.
when you look at it, you go, okay, this is actually a really powerful way to not only engage our current employees, attract new employees, connect with customers. Like you sort of go, okay, it'd be pretty dumb not to, wouldn't it?
Mm.
It's just,
Yes.
Absolutely. Could you share an example with us? Because I think that, that was probably one of the things when I first listened to what you had to say, because my imagination goes into, oh my God, I have to come up with a story, and when did that happen? But what I learned through you is that doesn't have to be long, and it can be just the most mundane thing or just something that you think, because people go, oh, I can't come up with stories, I can't think of anything, because they're expecting like the big life changing moments, but it's so much more subtle than that, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things you just said, it doesn't have to be long. It should not be long at
Yeah.
all. It's like,
Yeah.
again, one of the, I mean, I see a lot of mistakes people make with storytelling. One, the most common is they just go too long. And
Yeah.
like, I will see people tell a story and I go, great story. If it was under 2 minutes, it would have been a brilliant story. So knowing that structure and having the discipline, what to leave out and how you get your story really succinct. So that's my advice too. Like, your story should be like a minute or 90 seconds and no longer than 2 minutes. I'll share an example. Like there's so many
Mm.
examples I was thinking I
Mm.
could share with you, but I'll share one that I think is a great example of really simple, like a really simple thing, because this is not about the life-changing moments or the climbing Mount Everest or the recovering from
Yeah.
cancer and all that. I mean, yes, sometimes those stories can work, but it's the more day-to-day one. So the example was I was working with a risk team, and the head of risk, her name was Rosemary. And she said, look, one of the biggest challenges I have is that when I talk about risk management, everyone looks at me and go, you're the risk manager, that's your job. And she said, it doesn't matter how many times I've told them I can't manage their risk. All I can do is help you manage their risk. And she's gone, I've given case study after case study, example after example, and nothing changes. She goes, I have tried everything. She tried everything except a personal story. So this is the story. This is the story she sort of came up in one of my training workshops and has used to great effect. And she said, when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm. And growing up on a farm, there was all these dangers we needed to be aware of, but mum would teach us what to do. So we knew what to do when we came across redback spiders in the timber heap. We knew about all the potential traps in the dam after heavy rain, and we knew what to do if we ever came across a snake in summer. And I remember this day, mum was yelling at me to get my bike from the front gate. So I was running down the path, and then in front of my bike was this massive copperhead snake. But I remembered everything mum taught us to do. So I played statue, and I slowly walked backwards until there was enough space between me and the snake, and I ran back to the house to tell mum. And I'm sharing this with you because it reminds me of the role we play in risk. All I can do is give you the skills, knowledge, and advice. So when you come across your own copperhead snake, regardless of what that looks like, you will know what to do. Now,
Wow.
Mic drop.
Yeah. So mic drop. But
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions, right? Your listeners can play along.
Oh,
Yeah.
Does that story help you understand the role of a risk manager better and the role you play in risk? Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
So it helps you understand the message, right? Which is sort of what we're trying to do when we communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Will you remember that story?
Yes.
Yeah,
Definitely.
you will. And there's a whole heap of research that shows how the brain processes emotion and logic, and you will absolutely remember it. And if you just thank me, I've potentially saved your life if you come across a snake.
Statue, walk back
play
slowly.
statue, walk back slowly, go tell your mum. So it helps you understand the message. You're going to remember it. When the meeting's over, the presentation's finished, the conversation's ended, people will actually remember it. And third question, if you had to, could you retell that story to someone else without losing its meaning?
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't do it word for word, but you could. Yeah. Clunky, but you wouldn't lose the gist of it. And so when we're communicating, I reckon some of the fundamental challenges we have is, do they understand what you're saying and really understand it? And don't get, convinced by nodding heads. That means nothing. Can they remember it when it's over? And if they had to, can they then retell it to others? So if you think in some of the times you're communicating, you might be, let's say you're speaking to a potential client and you're speaking to 2 or 3 potential clients that then have to go back to their boss or whatever and sell in. If you provide a personal story that they understand, remember, retell, that's what they're going to tell. That's sort of what's sticky. The stories make your information sticky. You still need information, but data, facts, like it's a given, but they're so not sticky.
Oh,
I love that.
And this is expanding the conversation just from a leader talking to their team, but I'm thinking sales conversations, particularly when not with the decision maker, and the other thing that I'm thinking and actually feeling and hearing when I'm listening to your story is, particularly from a sales context, which is definitely my background. We know that people don't make decisions logically.
No, they
we
don't.
make decisions emotionally. And really, when we're telling stories, when we're engaging, when we're leading, whether it's sales, leadership, whatever it might be, we're actually wanting to get buy-in. So there's a subconscious decision that has to be made there to go, oh, I've bought into that. Yes, I get it. And the example of Rosemary,
the snake,
she's selling the fact that don't rely on me, and she sold it. I'm buying what you bought it totally, and in a way as well.
Yeah. So the human brain, you talked about the human brain processes emotion first. And we use logic to rationalize.
Yes.
And anyone in traditional sales will tell you people buy on emotion and they justify on logic.
Yes.
And whether you're buying a new pair of shoes or the latest iPhone or buying a house or buying into working for you, working with you, they will make an emotional decision and they will use logic to rationalize it. I mean, I reckon all of us have been in a situation, whether we're buying for a car or looking for a real estate agent to work with. You have a meeting with a few people and they've all sort of presented pretty much the same data, and you walk away going, I don't know what it was, but I just feel like I could work with them. I just feel they would be a good fit. That is an emotional decision.
Yeah.
And, and then you'll rationalize and justify why you're spending more money because
yes.
So, that's the power of story, because stories tap into emotion without you knowing it or having control. And the other thing, our brain does with emotion, it stores it in the long-term part of the brain. So the reason you'll remember the snake story, it's already gone to the long-term part of your brain because it's tapped into emotion without, and again, when I say emotion, I'm not saying emotional. You've got no control. Everyone who's just heard that story, without you knowing it, and you have got zero control, it is already tapped into emotion.
Isn't it amazing? It's funny, as you're saying that, what comes up for me is we do this in life in general with our friends, with our family. I think it's something that just comes naturally. You're hanging out with your friends and you go, oh my God, let me tell you about what happened, or something like that. My son recently, one of the guys is in a share house of 4 people, and one of the guys is moving. So he was in charge of putting the ad in the paper. And he goes, I've got really judgy mum, because they all say they're clean, they're tidy, they're quiet, all these kinds of things. And he said, what it was about the guy that they ended up choosing to come in and move in is he talked about, he was from Scotland, and he goes, I grew up like on the outskirts of Glasgow, and I just wanted to explore the world and have a different adventure. And he was just like, he stood out from everyone, and they could relate, because those poor boys from country Victoria moved to Queensland. So even in just like what that guy didn't know he was doing, he was creating a level of that stood out from where everybody else was the same.
Yeah, shared a story connection. So I mean, stories are brewing in job interviews too, because you're just going in. But it's creating a connection. I mean, if for those of us that's got kids, we know when we teach our kids, it's really important lessons. We will tell a story. We will tell a story of what happened, and because they remember that. But we go into business and we go, we can't tell the story. Let's whip out a PowerPoint with bullet points on it, and it's so important. Let's do a Gantt chart, and then oh my God, please show me more PowerPoints, said no one ever.
Yes.
But when was the last time you're out with your friends and it's just story, because it's the way you don't suddenly stop and go, okay, I've had too much stories. Can someone please whip out that Excel spreadsheet? But oh my God, we're going PowerPoint. I'm missing PowerPoint. We go into business, and somewhere, someone, some idiot decided that business shouldn't be personal. Remove emotion from business. But you're dealing with people. Why do you think removing emotion is a good thing? It's crazy.
And I think it's really interesting. You said, and what you shared with us was a framework that you use with your clients. And I was so impressed. I shared it with clients of ours, and it was a group of maybe about a dozen leaders. And it's really interesting to see when the structures followed, how different it is. Because at the end of the workshop, they all had to get up and tell their story, which made them really nervous, but they were all very brave. And there was one person who just couldn't get her head around it being a personal story. So the story she told was, I was walking out of the office one day with one of the other leaders in the room, and we were talking about this thing to do with work, and then sort of like that became her story. And it was just like talking about work, right? So she goes, no, it was personal, because we were having a conversation walking out of the building. And it was like, but I didn't buy into that. Whereas one of the guys told a story which was really, it was short and simple, but it was to do with, his kids and sailing and all this kind of stuff. And everybody in the room was just like, oh, wow. Now, he didn't get it perfect, but for what he wanted to achieve, and this is the thing, obviously, that's important, you've got to work out what's the message I want to send, what's the outcome, what's this story going to be for? But I just noticed in that that without the framework or without even linking it back to something personal, it just didn't land anywhere
No.
near as powerful. And
Yeah.
I imagine that's what you would see and why you have a framework in place, right?
Yeah. So you talk about the framework. So I do teach the framework, and it was like, people go, oh, they're engineers or whatever. I go, don't worry. I take them through a very logical framework, and out pops the end. And one of the things I do is get them to practice their stories in, small groups. And I'm almost, even though I push them and encourage them, go share a non-work related story. There's always a few that just don't get it and still share a work story. And because it's about them, they think it's personal. And part of me is I do want them to experience it. But part of me, when someone does it, I'm sort of secretly happy because everyone else hears the personal story and goes, oh my God, that was amazing. Oh my God, that was amazing. And then someone tells the sort of work one and they're going, yeah, nah, there was no connection there. And so they get to experience the power of sharing these non-work related stories. But the real skill, and this is the real skill, is how you connect that to your business message. Because if you don't do that right, people walk away going, what the hell was that about?
Yes.
What purpose did I need to hear about the sun's sailing?
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, you have shared so much already in terms of the importance and the benefits of storytelling. And I trust that our listeners are starting to shift their thinking. And I think the other thing that's really important is you've looked at sharing some of the nuggets of gold around good storytelling. So you mentioned the phrase good storytelling a couple of times, which, things like the length, making sure it's connected to the message. Just what you leave out is just as important as what you bring in. Is there anything else from a lasting point of view before I head into the last question, which is, of course, the actionable action? But in terms of defining high-level good storytelling, anything else that you would add?
Well, look, the overall, the good story should meet the purpose. And that is, people understand, remember it, they connect with it. To me, a really great brand story can change the way people think about your product and your service. But yeah, we're succinct. I guess my only other little bit of advice is don't start your story with, let me tell you a story.
Oh, yeah.
And don't end your story with the moral of the story is.
Okay, writing that down. Excellent. Also, by the way, that is harder. Now, when you go to tell a story, that kind of language can really sneak in. Like we laugh at it, it's like, oh, that's so obvious, but it can really sneak in.
Yeah,
and another little sort of reminder, you said at the very beginning that this is a practice, it's a skill. So this is something that we can learn to get better and better and better at. So with that in mind, what is one actionable action that our listeners and probably us as well can go away and put into action from this incredible conversation?
Yeah, well, look, I think I've provided a few tips around like how not to tell a story. I would say, I mean, I could cover so many things. I'm going to do on my website, there is a free 7-day storytelling starter kit. So it's free. If you subscribe to that, you get an email from me for once a day for 7 days, and it will just give you it'll be your starter kit. So it's not the whole skilling. Don't think you're going to do that and then go. A lot of people do this and go, oh, I wish there was more. I go, yeah, mate, that's called my workshop.
Yes.
But
there is more, everybody. There is more.
There is more. And there, if you want another action item, I'm running a public storytelling workshop in May. But I think just start educating yourself, start thinking about it. If you want to get the skill, like I do run training, if you want your team to have it, which is really important, because it shouldn't just be the CEO sharing stories. Think about how collectively as a team you can do it, because it not only helps them, it not only helps you, connect with employees, engage employees and customers, but the sharing of stories is like such an unbelievable team building activity too, because we get to know each other better. So there's a few things.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
love
there's
it.
There's so many great resources that you have out there. You've got an awesome podcast that you just recently launched.
Yay, it's called Keeping It Real with Jack and Ral. I'm Ral, in case you're wondering. You know,
Yes.
this is like Keeping It Real with Jack and Gabrielle sounded
Yeah.
a bit similar.
You also have some incredible books. As you said, there's public workshops that you run. So we're going to make sure that we put all the links in the show notes. Is there anywhere particularly, we've already shared your website, but anywhere particularly you would like to direct people to come and check you out and check out your work?
Look, I think it'll be in the show notes, but yeah, check out the podcast. The website has the starter day kit. It has all my books. I would say, if you know, I've written 7 books. Not it's a competition, and not bad, and not bad for someone who failed last year of English. But the latest book I've written is Magnetic Stories, and I reckon that is like if you're going to start anywhere, I reckon this is the best one because like the tagline is connect with customers and engage employees with brand storytelling, and you know, there's just so many cool stories in there of what other organizations are doing with stories. And I think if you're a business owner or a business leader, that'll give you just so many ideas of where you could go with this.
Amazing. See, there's so much more. There's always more.
There's always more. Well, I'm going to go and sign up for that 7-day starter kit because we're really enjoying incorporating this into our business, and particularly as we move forward, we never want to lose sight of the reason why we went into business together. So thank you so much, Ral. You have been amazing, and we really appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Catch you next week. Bye.